Hello, it's Jansen here again from the Conversational Hypnosis Academy. Welcome back to session 3 of our question and answers for hypnosis and mastery with conversational hypnosis. So as per usual, if you haven't listened to the last 2 submissions, I advise you go ahead and listen to those first to gain some understandings from previous questions from previous students that we've answered and hopefully take something away from them to start to embellish the way that you do hypnosis. As per usual, let's jump straight into the 6 questions we have for you today, and let's see what we can do with these. So the first question is, what is the best way to master conversational hypnosis? Now, when I first started, this was a question that would circle around in my mind over and over again. Now, there's many ways to do anything. Everyone learns differently. Everyone structures their learning. Everyone has time to learn in different places and different times. So it's really up to the individual. The only advice I could give you right here in regards to mastering communication with conversational hypnosis is to do something that a lot of hypnotists will not do, whether it's being too scared to do it, too anxious to do it, or just not understanding the whole process itself, is to start to play with something called context. Now, context is what drives hypnosis and allows hypnosis to occur and survive in the first place. What I mean by context, let's consider your client comes into your office for a hypnotherapy session. The context is set. You are running a hypnotherapy business. The context is you are a hypnotherapist and your office is suited for hypnotherapy. And that's one way to do great hypnosis. But it's not really pushing the limits of your ability to be able to master something where the context doesn't fit. So what I mean by when a context doesn't fit, well, write down a list of places or just even think of a list of places where hypnosis would be difficult, such as at a bar when there's loud noises, at a social gathering, at a social club, at a wedding, at a birthday party, over the phone, in a sales meeting, anywhere where you think hypnosis doesn't really exist. Now, what do you do with these places? This is where you find yourself in these situations where you should be trying to use your hypnotic repertoire. Is where you should be trying your language patterns. You should be trying to navigate people's attention. You should be trying your hypnotic stories. You should be trying to elaborate on hypnotic realities and have people experience new ways with communication. Now, if you can nail these places where the context isn't there for you, where you almost have to change your approach to suit the context that you're in, this is the place where you'll fundamentally change the way you view hypnosis, your understandings of it, and the true essence of pure mastery in communication, and the way to talk and communicate to people with everything you say becomes so transformational that they leave and talk about you for their remaining of their life. And this is a great place where hypnosis is to master. Instead of looking at hypnosis, well, I need to be in a context for hypnosis to work for me, for example, your office, think about it another way. Find yourself in places where the context doesn't fit and think to yourself, what do I have to do different? What do I need to change in my approach to have the same things occur that occur in my office outside of my office? And when you think of going back to your office, you can imagine how easy it's going to be because the context is there. Context is king. If you can master hypnotic context and allow everything else to follow, you will truly put your finger on the essence of conversational hypnosis and the way to really master hypnosis in itself with people like Milton Erickson. This is what Erickson was known for. He wasn't just using hypnosis in the context of his office. He was using hypnosis everywhere he could because it became such a part of him that the context was irrelevant. He would find himself, and people would report this, that he'd be able to do certain things at any time in any place he found himself in. Now, this takes practice. This takes sort of an approach where you don't care about the outcome. Yes, the first couple of times you try and do this, it will be nerve-wracking. You'll be thinking, oh my God, what have I got myself into? How do I do this? How am I supposed to use this style of hypnosis when I'm got loud noises in the background or people aren't really paying attention to me? These are the places where you can switch your mind over and start to get really creative. And this is about working with the context. So hopefully that clears it up. And that's only a little bit of advice I can give for that. But it really helped me. It helps a lot of our students. And it tends to push you really far into the realms of hypnosis where a lot of hypnotists want to be and dream about being, but don't get there. Next question we have is a very common one. What happens if my client is sleeping? Now, the jury is out. There's no real right or wrong answer to this. Investigations or studies into can people still get a therapeutic outcome while they're sleeping is is part and parcel of what we do. There's no real understanding of it. There's a lot of investigation that goes on. I can only give you my thoughts and theories behind this. Being that we're conversational hypnotists, I love having a conversation with my clients. I want to make sure that they're alert enough and I have much of their attention so they can do something fundamental while they're in my presence. When they're sleeping, it is very hard to find out what is occurring with your client. Have they finished their own therapy? Are they in the right place, in the wrong place? Can they actually hear me? Can they understand things? Yes, the unconscious mind is always listening. But the way I view the sleeping side of it is because A, you have not been accepting your client in regards to you haven't been working with them. You've almost been talking to them to the point of maybe boredom or just sleep itself. Or you've pushed your client so far deep they've gone beyond the realms of hypnosis into the hypnagogia stage. They're the parts of the past where they're starting to sleep instead of having a therapeutic intervention. So my advice here is if your client is sleeping is to try to bring them up a couple of levels or wake them up completely and maybe change your approach. Now, again, this touch on the idea of, different levels of hypnosis that you take your clients through. This is something that I don't put a lot of attention on myself and something we don't really teach our students because, again, these are just theories, and with too many theories, it starts to muddy the water, so to speak. So the idea here is, and the way that I view it, if I have a client in front of me that's asleep, I want to wake them up. And it just means I've taken the wrong approach. So instead of talking at my client, which a lot of therapists tend to do, especially with the script-based hypnosis, talk with your clients, include them, get feedback, find out what's occurring. It'll make your life a lot easier as a hypnotist. The next question is I keep getting stuck in knowing what to do or what to say next. Do you have any advice? In regards to not knowing what to do or finding yourself in a place where you're rather confused or you can't express the right message is because you're in the wrong headspace. What it means is you're trying to do hypnosis to your client from a more conscious level. We have to understand that as a hypnotist, as we're growing into this field, there's a lot of study to be done. There's a lot of things we need to understand, and there's a lot of techniques, there's a lot of methods, there's a lot of ways to do certain things. We have to remember that as we study these things, as we absorb this information, this goes unconscious. So when you're trying to do therapy where you've learned it all unconscious, it gets very, very awkward. You'll stumble over your own words, and you'll run out of things and what to do and what to say next. So my best advice here is if you're getting stuck to know what to do or what to say next, take a step back, take a different approach. Realize that you need to be more in your own trance and allow your unconscious mind to express itself, just like we want our client's unconscious mind to express itself. And the whole idea of trying, if you ever try to do something too much, you're going to get that reverse effect starting to happen. It's the same thing here. If you're trying to navigate through a client's unconscious consciously, or you're trying to remember the steps from 1 to 10 or whatever you do as a therapist, you are making hypnosis very, very hard for yourself, and you'll probably find yourself as stuck as your client. The next question we have is, what are the best rapport techniques? Now, there are many ways to look at rapport. There are many different techniques, and some are absolutely fabulous. Some look great on paper, but aren't really executed that well when it comes to a face-to-face intervention. Again, my only advice here, and this is just our advice, is be a caring individual. Think about it like this. You've probably had times in your life where you've met someone for the first time, maybe at a social gathering, and you've really connected with this person. And maybe that person that you met years ago is now one of your best friends. And you have to think to yourself, was I using rapport techniques then? Where were my strategies while I was making friends with this complete stranger? Well, they probably weren't there. You weren't concentrating on them. But what was coming out is your own natural ability to interact with people, to care about what people say. So we need to take the same mindset into your therapy office. If you're too busy doing rapport techniques, you're too busy matching and mirroring, you're too busy listening to kinesthetic words or auditory words or anything like that, you're pulling yourself away from your own unconscious and natural ability to connect with somebody and absorb yourself in the moment. You have to be really in the moment, and anytime you're trying to do something to your client or almost connect with them on a very conscious level, on a very mechanical level, you're pulling yourself away from the session itself. Instead, care about your client, listen to them. Sometimes listening to a client is all they need, because sometimes they come to you with pain and hurt feelings. It's because they haven't been listened to. And just by listening to them enough, not absorbing everything they say because we don't want our own sort of rubbish to come up at that time when we start to enter our own trance, but listen to them with a caring heart. Listen to them as if you really do care about the outcome of today. The next question we have is, I've heard you talk about giving advice before. Can you elaborate more on this idea? When it comes to advice, we have to almost pull ourselves back from giving any advice as a hypnotist. And again, this is just the way that we structure our learning for a hypnotist. Advice is crucial. Advice is given at the right time, can be transformational. But your delivery of advice and the advice you give is what gets a lot of people caught. We know as therapists, or we should know, we should be well versed in this, that our client has to create their own outcome. They have an unconscious resource that is far subsides what we can do consciously, which means that whatever advice you have consciously for your client will not come close to the impact of a client's own resources and own advice on their own problem. So when you're giving advice, you've got to think one thing. When you give advice, it could be the one thing they need to hear. You can know exactly what they would need to hear to change their life. But given at the wrong time, or in the wrong mindset, or in the wrong place in trance, can negate that advice, taint it with negative feelings and connotations, and it means that you're limiting your client's own ability to come up with that advice for themselves. So let's say for smoking, for example, if you know that all your client had to do was just stop buying cigarettes, and you told them this, and their response was, well, I've tried that before, that hasn't worked, that could have been the one very thing they could have come up with themselves to transform their whole life. But because you've given it and they've rejected it, it now does not become a possibility. So we've got to be very, very careful with advice. And to make this even more clear, we think about it like this. Whatever you can think of consciously, their unconscious can come up with so many better ways, easier ways, and more transformational ways than you could make a list of. So why give advice? If you know your client needs to hear something, you can give advice, but it has to be more abstracted. You have to almost nudge the unconscious to start to think the way that you think and see if it's a possibility. We don't want to give advice at the wrong time. We don't want to be giving cemented advice to say this is the only way you can do things, because then you're as limited in thinking as your client. So hopefully that makes sense. Question number 6. It seems my techniques work sometimes, but then they don't on other times. Do you have any thoughts? Now, when it comes to techniques, strategies, maneuvers, they're all essentially creating the same thing. We're taking a client's mind to where it's not, which is normally from consciousness, into more unconsciousness to find out where the issues are, to find out where the blocks are. So you're going to find that some techniques are, I guess, for lack of better words, marketed in a way to say that it'll fix everything. It's the A to Z technique, and we've talked about this before in previous audios. These do not exist. So first thing, we need to get rid of this mindset that techniques solve the issue. What technique, or the way we can view techniques and what they can do, is put a client into a place where they can generate new resources, new thoughts, and new fundamental feelings about the issue itself and transform their life. So if you're finding some techniques work sometimes, that's great. On the times it's not working, this just calls for your flexibility and your creativity. And if you remember, question 1 is what's the best way to master conversational hypnosis? This is the reason why we go out and try these different contexts. It's learning to think on your feet, to be creative. Hypnosis is really about being creative. How quickly can you think of what to do next if that thing is not working? So if you're finding your techniques work some of the time, take note of it, but don't rely on them to work all together. But also don't take it to heart. If you find that sometimes you're in a session, nothing seems to be going right, even the best hypnotists of all time have reported the same thing. Not everything works 100% of the time. Some things work great. Some other things are better at other times. And there might be some things you'll never use because you never find the way to use them. This is all fine. This is all part of our extensive learning. This is what makes hypnosis fun. This is what makes hypnosis more of an exploration for yourself as well. So, in regards to this, to recap that, if your techniques work some of the time, that is fantastic. Take note of it, but don't rely on them. Be flexible. Start to create your own version of hypnosis. Be your own therapist. It was Milton Erickson who said himself, everyone should be creating their own style of therapy for every individual client, meaning that not everything works for an individual client. Not everything works for everybody. Be creative, be spontaneous, and play with those contexts. Play with hypnosis in place where it should not fit, and your creativity will grow with you to exponential levels that you never thought was possible for your own hypnosis learning. So that's all we have for today. Hope you enjoyed the answers to those 6 questions. Again, we'll be repeating this process over and over to the extent that we get through all these questions, because they are fundamental in your own understanding of what can be done with hypnosis. So if you do have any questions that you'd like us to answer, just address those questions to info@conversationalhypnosisacademy.com. We would love to answer them. Again, my name is Scott Jansen. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will see you next time on session 4. Bye for now.